Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Wachtler. I'm the VP of Business Intelligence at Agentiq. Now, this session is for all business operators and leaders. You do not need to be technical to be here. What you do need is to be clear on the business decisions that you are trying to make and that you are trying to support. And we're going to get into that further here today. So one thing to note, even though I'm recommending demoing in ChatGPT and Replit here, the approach I'll be showing you is tool agnostic, so it will apply to other tools of your choice as well. So let's show you what you will walk out of this session with. The first thing that you're going to build here, and we're going to use ChatGPT or LLM, is to create a build specification that tells our coding tool, which in this case is going to be Replit, how to build an application. And so we're going to use that build specification, put in a Replit, and then you're going to get a working V1 of your application. We're then going to export a zip file from Replit, put that back into ChatGPT, create an update spec in ChatGPT, and that update spec could then be used to create a what I call meeting-ready and decision-ready application. And what I'll be teaching you, the approach I'm teaching you, I'm calling it the fast cycle, and it's a repeatable method that you can use on your next real business project. So just quick agenda, 5 minutes right now, we're getting started. We're going to go into information session 1, where we'll talk about the fast cycle and creating the build specification. Then we're gonna have 20 minutes where you're gonna build V1 of your application. I'll walk around and help as needed. We'll take a quick 5-minute break. We'll come back, we'll have information session 2, where we talk about upgrading the build spec for the V2 of our application. We're gonna have you do that in exercise 2 for 20 minutes where you build the V2 upgrade spec. And then we'll have about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A and wrap up. So quick show of hands before we get going here. Who has used AI tools, AI coding in the last month or so to build something at work? I assume most of us, but not everybody. Love seeing a good show of hands here. And for those of you who haven't, this is a perfect workshop for you to be in because you're going to get to do it today. I'm excited to get started with all of you. All right, let's talk about the old way versus the new way of building internal business applications. Now, the traditional way is what most of us are used to. You start with a requirements document. It needs to be filled out pretty in depth. There's a lot of material that goes in there and you spent all that time and work, and where does it go? It goes into somebody's backlog, right? Your engineering team, your product team, maybe your team's backlog, but unless it's prioritized right away, you're not getting something quickly, so you have to wait. Eventually, after the backlog, after the waiting, you get an output from that process. It's likely not something you're gonna be able to use right away. It probably needs a lot of back and forth. And so it takes a lot of time to get to having something usable. And even after one iteration, you're not ready to use it in meetings. It's not ready for decision making. Versus what I call the fast cycle, and I'll define this more on the next slide. But basically, this is using agentic tools to frame your business decision, have your AI tools ask you questions, then you build the spec, you test it and update, and within a few hours, maybe a few days to a week, you have something that you're ready to take to your stakeholders, take to your executives, and actually use in a meeting to make decisions. So on timing alone, just the ability to develop now has come so much further. So it's much faster and it's a lot more available to people who aren't traditional developers as well. One important thing I do want to mention on the slide, we're optimizing for decision ready, not production ready. There's a lot of critique that if you vibe code, if you're coding with these tools, it's not ready for production, and that's okay. What we're trying to get to before production ready is decision ready, being able to use it in that meeting to make decisions. And then if it earns it later on, then you harden it. Then you add the scaling, then you add the security, then you add everything else. And you know what? If it's not a good app, you trash it. You start over again. So I think everyone is so focused on production, but there's this whole piece in the middle where you could get great value out of these applications before it goes into a production state. All right, so here is what I call the fast cycle. We'll walk through each of the letters here. So F is for frame. You're going to frame the decision, the business question that you are trying to support, that you are supporting for your stakeholders. So what decision does your application need to support or need to help you make? A is ask better questions. So this one, you're going to have your LLM ask you clarifying questions that sharpen your specification. You're not just going to jump directly to building. You're going to interact with the LLM, not only tell it what to do, but have it ask you questions to get a clear spec. You're then going to have it write the build specification. Once you have that specification, you could build the application, you could test it, you could iterate, see what works, improve it, trash it if you need to, and you could start back over from the beginning if things change. So we're building meeting-ready prototypes with trust queues, and trust queues means the data ties out. You're able to tell that the data is complete, there aren't any missing fields or anything like that. There's general trust in the data that is being presented. And again, if it earns it later on, then you could harden it for production. But we're trying to get to the meeting-ready, decision-ready prototype first. So this fast cycle is a loop. Run it anytime direction changes. If you have a new question or a new stakeholder come in or something, you could start from the top, run it back through, and repeat as many times as you need to. We're going to be running this cycle twice today. So first in exercise 1 to build the V1 of our build specification and our app. And then again in V2 to create our update specification. So let's talk about what Agentiq means here. And I'm sure in all your sessions today, you've probably heard 5 to 10 different definitions of what Agentiq means. So I'm not going to argue about what it means broadly, but here in this session, this is what we're using Agentiq to mean. So it's 3 areas. So first, it's making sure to prioritize what matters in your data, in your application that needs to be surfaced, that needs to be shown, ranking the top drivers of issues in your data, and clearly being able to see what matters in that data quickly. Decision-ready output. So whatever your application builds, you need to make sure that either you or your stakeholders, your executives can make a decision on that output. So there needs to be something in that application that says, hey, these are the decisions you need to make, and here's what you should do for that. And lastly, it shows its work. You need to be able to drill into any number, make sure it ties to the summary, see data issues clearly. And so if you have these things, then you could build a successful internal business application. Now let's talk about why clarifying questions matter here. And this is the A in the fast cycle, have your LLM ask you better questions. So let's go through 2 scenarios here. In the before scenario, we're not going to have ChatGPT or LLM ask us questions. We're just going to go right to it, say, build me an executive-ready application spec from the CSV, from this data that I am uploading to you. And so you've probably realized what's going to happen if you do this. You're not going to get what you want, right? It's going to be a generic layout. The data is not going to be ranked. The drill down may not be there. It may not tie to the summary numbers. It may decide to treat data gaps as 0, which you may not want. So the result of that is definitely something that's not decision ready. In fact, it probably will take a lot more time to get that to a place where it's usable versus in the after situation, have your model ask you clarifying questions first, and then you build the spec. And what that does, you're able to prioritize what matters. You're able to have the clear priorities surfaced. Your drill down will tie to real questions. The detail will tie to the summary. You're going to have that data trust built in, which is very important. And then the result is that you're going to end up with a decision-ready, meeting-ready application. So the questions are the work here. You do not want to skip them. They're very important to the process of building your internal Agentiq application. All right, so before we build, these are the key design areas for an internal Agentiq app. Now, this is not a checklist we're going to work through line by line, but it's a quick view of the design choices that shape a strong internal Agentiq application. So let's go through these. First is the goal. So what decision should this application support? What decision should this application help you or your stakeholders make? That's the most important thing in these applications. The second one, and I don't know that enough people think about this, but it's so important. What is on the first screen of your application? What are your users seeing immediately? What are their eyes drawn to? What action do you want them to take? Because if you don't have that clear, they may start clicking all over and doing things that you didn't intend. So really driving their behavior with this application is important. Number 3, showing what matters most, being able to rank those key drivers in your data, very clearly important. So you know what the biggest drivers, what the biggest issues are in your data. Number 4, the drill down. So being able to see the detail behind the numbers, tying the summary to the detail. The data trust. So any visible data gaps, being able to see those. And so you could take action on any gaps that exist in the data. And then lastly, your guardrails. So you could put scope and focus around the application. And this is important so that your apps don't just start building everything and anything under the sun. This helps you focus the application on what you need built. So Let's now make this concrete and discuss the scenario that we're going to use in exercise 1 and 2 for today's build. So let's set the stage. I think this is a scenario that many of you are familiar with. You might have had this recently at your company, but a monthly budget versus actual executive review. So you run a P&L for your business, and every month you need to go up in front of your executives and present on what is going on in our budget versus actuals. So let's talk about each of these areas. So the moment, so your monthly executive review is coming up. You know this is a high pressure, high stakes meeting. Your execs are very direct and they don't have much patience for not understanding what you're presenting or getting to the point quickly. The brief, you need to be able in that meeting to explain what happened, what matters, and what, most importantly, what decisions they need to make after that meeting. And of course, because they're executives, they always ask the hard question, what's behind that number? So they see a number, it triggers something in their head, they don't think it's right, and they ask you, what's behind that number? Let me see the detail. And unless you could answer that live, that question there is going to derail your whole meeting because you'll spend the rest of the time just talking about that one number. You won't get to the decision. So being able to not only show the detail, but make sure it's aligned to the summary and that there's a clear path through that is critical in a meeting such as this. All right, so before I have you all go into exercise 1, I'm gonna just do a live walkthrough here to show you what this looks like. I'm gonna bring up this workshop kit down here. Now don't worry, this URL is on the next slide for exercise 1, so you all get that in a sec, but let me just walk through and show you the process for building the V1 specification in ChatGPT and then taking that and putting it into Replit. So going to jump over to here. I have this Agentiq app workshop kit, and I will give you the URL on the next slide. So don't worry. Let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. There we go. I did develop this in Replit as well. And so this Agentiq app workshop kit has several files that we're going to be using in this workshop. So for round 1, there's 2 files that you're going to need. You're going to want the starter data set, and this is just the CSV of budget versus actual data. There's not a lot of rows, maybe about 40 rows, but just to show you roughly what you could start building with. And then P2 here is the round 1 spec builder prompt. So let me open that up so you can see what that looks like. And let's go like this here. There we go. Okay. So you can see it's not a large prompt that we're going to put into ChatGPT. Pretty small, at least for the V1, but you're basically specifying, I need a Replit app for business review. I need you to help me create a strong build spec. I'm going to attach the CSV, ask me a set of high value clarifying questions that materially improve the app before writing the spec. You're telling them you're preparing for a monthly executive review and what you need to be able to describe and understand in the meeting. A little bit about visual expectation. You want to be visually strong, easy to read, and useful. And lastly, just some guardrails around questions that they should ask and how. So for this V1, I said, don't ask any more than 6 questions, multiple choice, make sure they improve the build spec. And then lastly, and this is the most important part, after I respond, output exactly 1 final block only with the heading copy into Replit and nothing else. So what this is going to do is after you answer that first set of questions, it's going to output exactly 1 copy into Replit block. And that's what you're going to copy into Replit. And that is what is going to build the V1 of your application. So you're basically telling it, ask me questions about the CSV, about this project. After I respond, give me the 1 block for Replit. And that's all I want you to do, ChatGPT. So we're putting some guardrails around this. So let me copy this here. We'll jump into ChatGPT. I will paste that. Oh, wait, before I paste it, let me make sure I get my data file in here as well. So we got the CSV that I downloaded from the workshop kit. Okay, so I've got the CSV in here. I've got the build prompt. I've got to run it. And so it's going to take a minute here. While this is thinking, before it asks me the questions, I'm just going to bring up the CSV so you can see quickly what the data looks like. Again, not too complex here. There's about 49 rows. You have by dates, so you have by month and then the actual date. The function is the business function that the budget and actual line belongs to. So when you're answering your questions, if ChatGPT asks how you want to group the data, I would recommend using the function here. It goes into categories, so program or tools, the initiative name, owner, etc. The budget and the actual are obviously the most important data. So this gives you for each line item what the budget was for that item for that month, and then the actual, what actually was spent. It does calculate variance in here, although your tool could do that. And then there's the line item and the line item name. And this is the level of detail, the lowest level of detail. So if ChatGPT asks you what level of detail do you want to show this down to, you want to show the line item name because that's the lowest level that exists in the data. So just understanding how your data works obviously is important. I think that's important for everyone in every position, but that's going to help you understand what ChatGPT is going to ask you. So let's jump back into ChatGPT here. All right, so reviewing the CSV structure, data set is small and clean. All right, so yeah, it's telling you what it found in the CSV. It's already pointing out there's some data issues. And here, so now we get the questions and there we go. I'm just going to quickly go through and answer these, and then it'll create the V1 build spec. So what should the app optimize for? Let's go fast executive summary. What should be the default primary view on load? Let's say, I like the KPI summary here too. So just so I don't put A for all of these, I'm gonna change this one to C. Here we go. 3, what level should the app treat as the main unit of review? So this is the function. You want to look at it by business function. How should missing data be handled? Exclude bad rows. Here, let's create a dedicated data quality panel so we could actually look at what issues there are with the data. What output would be most useful? So I think B and C, the suggested actions and decisions, and exportable meeting ready summary. So we're going to go D. And number 6, what visual tone should this aim for? Yeah, let's go boardroom polished, just because you're in the executive meeting, you don't want to put too much into this. You want to get to the clear answers quickly. So I'm going to hit enter. And so ChatGPT, you saw all the questions it asked me were very relevant to the data that I uploaded. So it's not asking me questions about anything and everything. It's asking me questions specifically about the build specification that we are creating here. And so again, that's why the clarifying questions are so important, because without those, it's going to give you just generic outputs that you're going to have to refine and refine over and over again. So here you can see it's creating the copy into Replit block. And what is really nice about this, and you'll see as it builds this out, it hits on a lot of different sections that if you just went right into Replit, you probably wouldn't have thought to think of all these different areas. So it's giving you the app purpose, data set context. It's telling you about the users and the goals. It's going to go into the technical backend even of how it recommends Replit should build these things. And so what this is, see the recommended tech stack here. So it's giving a full output of detail so Replit doesn't have to make too many decisions on its own, right? We're going to load this into our coding tool. It's going to know what we're using this for, what the application should be, what should be built, and then we're going to go from there. So just want this to finish up. Will show you briefly how we put this into Replit. And then once I do that, then we're going to get started on our exercise 1. But you can see how detailed it is here, right? This would be a lot of work for someone to do on their own, to go through each section and write this all out. And even if you did a good job, it would take a lot of your time. So being able to get this full output from ChatGPT, and I'm not saying it's not good to review it. It's always worth reviewing your AI output. I think we all know that. But just being able to review something instead of having to create it yourself and then review it makes it much faster to get to value. All right, I'm going to cheat because this is taking a long time. So in the app workshop kit here, this is actually a P3 is a completed round 1 build spec. I don't want you to use this during the exercise unless you happen to get stuck, and then you could use this to build your Replit app. So I'm just going to download this, open this up here. Got the whole spec. I'm going to go into Replit and just paste it. And you'll see it puts it in as a text file, hit enter, and that's going to get going. Now that's going to take a minute to build. So after we complete the first exercise, I'll go in and show you what that looks like. But for now, let's jump back to our slides. Let's go to exercise 1. Okay, so this is the workshop kit URL. So tinyurl.com/Agentiq-app-kit. That will bring you to the workshop kit that has the files that you need. You go ahead, you open P2, which is the build spec prompt. and you make sure to attach the starter dataset CSV also. You answer the questions, it's going to generate your replit block, and then you paste that into Replit to build your V1. And like I just said, if you happen to get stuck, you can feel free to use the P3 golden build spec, but I do recommend trying to go through and understand the process yourself. I think right now, more companies are trying to be conservative because they don't want any issues in production, obviously. For the same reason, you don't let an intern immediately have access to production, right? You bring somebody new on, you put the guardrails around them to make sure they could only touch and do certain things in certain areas. So it's the same thing with an agent. You can't give it access to things where it could do potential damage unless you have guardrails and things in place that you really do trust. Most of you probably have an LLM approved at your organization at least. So what you could do with that, if you want to then show your boss or your executives what you're able to do with a tool like Replit, you take a CSV export of your data and you put it into ChatGPT or Claude or whichever LLM you're using and ask it to obfuscate your data for you. So what that does is it takes your data, but it removes the actual values. It'll put in fake made up encrypted values, but it keeps the field names, it keeps the structure and data type. And so that way, when you load that into Replit, into whatever you're coding with, it at least mimics your real data. So not only can you get to something that you could demo to your boss, to your executives to show them what you're capable of doing, but if they like it and they approve it, it should be easy enough to swap that data with your actual data set after. We're going to do a V1 reveal. So let's look at what Replit built. So I'm going to jump into, so let's take a look. In Replit, if you click this little arrow up here, it'll maximize it into a larger screen. And so here's what it created, right? It's not bad. It's a good V1. It gets you some information. It has your total budget information, your total actuals, gives you the variance, dollars. It gives you the variance percentage. It looks like you could click into these and so it gives you detail behind these. Now it's taking you to another screen. Maybe that's not the best use case or usability for this, but the detail is there. If you scroll down to what matters most, you see it's giving you at the lowest detail level, the highest variance percent. It doesn't let you sort by dollars. It doesn't let you see anything that was under budget versus over. So these are all things that you probably want to fix up for the V2 of your application. It does have the line item detail, so you can see everything that makes it up. It's not all on one screen. It's a little mixed up. You can sort on the different fields, which is nice. And lastly, what I want to show you, it does have this data quality attention thing here. You could click it. You could see what fields are missing if you have any. Doesn't look like it's actually working. Oh, there we go. Okay, so in the data, these are all the missing fields that you have in there. Because it's an executive review meeting, this being at the very top is not the best placement for it. You don't want your executives wondering what's wrong with the data, right? So having this, but maybe off to the side might be better. So I think this gives you a first version and it's good, but we're going to talk about how to update it one time to get it to a V2 so that you could actually use it for making decisions. So let's jump back to the slides. Let's talk about what changes in the V2 of your application to make it meeting ready and decision ready. So there's these 4 areas. So one, you want a cleaner layout. Now the layout it gave us wasn't bad. There were some obvious things that you could see in the data and you could get to some information, but it wasn't as clean as you want. So that's one thing that you're going to look to clean up is just the less visual noise on the slide, a sharper hierarchy, just making it easier to see what matters. And that feeds into the next one, which is your clearer priority signals. So really showing what matters in the data. And so what we saw was we were able to see what was over budget by most variance, but you really want to be able to adjust that and have that not just at the detail level, you want that at the function level. You want to be able to see dollar variance, not just percentage. You want to see what was under budget and over. So there's some work there to the priority signals and how they should be displayed. Now the trust queues, this actually wasn't bad for V1. The summary did tie out to the detail you saw when you clicked on a summary button. The detail for that box came up. You were able to see the data issues. I think the biggest issue with this was where the data issues were presented on the screen, and maybe the detail popping up on a totally separate screen and blocking out the rest wasn't what you want in your app. So those are all considerations for your V2. And then lastly, what it was missing was the decision-ready output. It didn't have anything to tell your executives, here are the decisions you need to look at and the actions you need to take. And that is one of the Agentiq factors that we need in our application. So we're going to make sure in V2 that we include this in our update spec, that we include it in our update prompt to ChatGPT, so it knows that you need some type of decision-ready output from your V2. These are all upgrades we want in V2, and the obvious question becomes, why do we need a second pass at all if you already had your V1? And you saw it, right? It's because V1, it gets you something quick and it looks usable to an extent, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done. So the V1 gets you to your starting point, and V2 is when you really take a step back and say, no, this is what I want, I don't want this, and you can clarify. So that's why we're going through this process twice to get it to that point where it's usable. And so let's talk about this a little bit more. So V1, usable but not sharp yet. That first screen that we saw, it was okay. The hierarchy wasn't great. Again, it's not obvious what is in the data that you need to look at. So visible but not obvious yet. What matters, it's there. It's hard to understand it right away. And then there was no takeaway from the issues on what matters. It's trustworthy, not clear enough. Again, the tie out and confidence, it just needs a little work. It wasn't bad, it was there, but we could improve that for V2. And this last one, I think, is the most important. It was working, but it was still too manual to the point where you would have to do a lot of explanation in the meeting of what the application is showing and what's important. And you don't want to have to spend your time explaining the application. You want the application to be understood by looking at it. So for V2, we're going to make sure that it's cleaner, it's more obvious what the data issues are, what you should be looking at. And we're going to make it so that it easily highlights the actions and the decisions that your executives need to look at. So V1, it definitely did its job. It was great. But the second pass is what is going to make it clearer, stronger, and easier to trust. Similar to exercise 1, I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough of how we're going to export the zip file from Replit. We're going to load that into ChatGPT, the same ChatGPT thread that we've been using, so it could see exactly what was built in Replit and understands. We're going to put our update prompt in ChatGPT. We are going to, again, put that zip file in from Replit, have it build our update spec for V2. And so for exercise 2, because it's likely that you hit credit limits in Replit on your version 1, the important thing that we're looking at here is to at least build the V2 spec. Once you have that spec built, you could then use that to create your V2. So if you're on free versions of Replit tomorrow, when your credits reset, you could go take your V2 update spec and create the V2 of your application. So let me go ahead and walk you through this here. So back to the Agentiq app workshop kit. So you see at the bottom here, there's reveal 1 and reveal 2. So we're in round 2. I password protected these so no one jumped ahead. The first password is blueprints. You could all capital, all lowercase, it is one word, blueprints. I am going to have that on the slide so you don't have to memorize it. Similar to round 1, there's 3 files in here. Now there's a example application zip file in here. I don't want you to use this. I'm going to show you how to get your zip file out of Replit. I want you to use that one, but this is here in case you weren't able to finish V1. The round 2 update prompt, I'll show you what that looks like to specify exactly what we want in the application. And then again, I don't want you to have to use this, but if it's getting to the end of the exercise and you're scrambling, R13 is a full update spec that you could use in Replit to update your V2. Now, if you use that, it's not going to be specific to your questions and your application and what you want. So these are only here as something to look at as a reminder, as a template, but going through the process yourself is what's going to give you the best outcome. So let me go into Replit here. And so this is how you get your application downloaded as a zip file from Replit. So in the top right here, there's this little button to open up the library. You click that. That's going to open the library. The second thing, you click on the file tree. Now, just as a quick aside on Replit, the file tree is really nice because you could see all the different files included in your package. You could see all the data files that it eventually includes and everything else. So as you work more on Replit, if your app starts getting slow, you could start to see in here, maybe you have a lot of junk files. There's a lot of different things that you could delete. So I really like the ability to see the library and what's included in your application. But once you're in the file tree, there's this little 3 dots right here at the top. You click that, and then you go to download a zip. So again, just library, file tree, 3 dots, and then download a zip. And that is going to download your whole Replit application as a zip file. So let that run at the same time. I'm going to download the second prompt here. And okay, so let me open up the second prompt. I took the build spec, I created a V1 in Replit. Now I need your help for creating the V2. I'm uploading the Replit project as a zip. Skim it again, ask me no more than 6 questions. Up to you how many questions you really wanted to ask you. Just reiterating, this is for a monthly executive review, but however, V2 needs to improve the usability and the confidence while staying fast. This section here, the V2 changes, these are the most important because this is where you specify, I didn't have this in V1, and now for V2, you have to include these areas. Just a few different things I'm including. The CEO executive brief. And so what this is doing, it's gonna add a generate executive brief function, and that'll create a summary of the headline, what matters, the decisions that they need to make. And that's that Agentiq piece that gets the executives what they need to take out of that meeting. So that's the first thing I've specified here in the V2 changes. Number 2, the what matters most defaults. Remember before we could only see it by percentage of variance over budget. So we want to change that. We want to be able to see by function first. We don't want at the lowest detail level. We want to see it by function. And then we want to be able to see by absolute dollar, over, under, by percentage. Option to switch between by function and by line item just gives you a lot more ability to drill into the data and be more flexible. Number 3, the KPI drill. So this was actually pretty good for V1, but just saying, make sure the data ties out. The data issues, if you remember, is pretty big across the top in V1. So we're just saying use a compact issues badge in the top that you could hover over and click. So it'll still be included, but it'll be off to the side. And a little bit of polish here now. Not everybody likes dark mode. I happen to prefer dark mode, so I put it in here for your layout. The one screen first view, and actually I didn't touch on this when we looked at V1, but it was more than one page. And so that's not a great user experience to have the app go below the page. If everything could be on that single page, it's gonna be a lot easier to see everything right away. So we're saying build it just on one screen, no scrolling, don't do anything to the back end. I don't want you re-architecting or changing anything. This is all client-side, front-end changes that you're making. And then just some acceptance criteria. So I'm going to copy this into ChatGPT. So I'm going to copy the prompt in here. I'm also going to paste the zip file that was downloaded from Replit in there. So budgetexecutive.zip. Let me drag this in here. There we go. Okay, so we don't need to upload the CSV again. It still has it in memory. Right now, it's downloading the zip file. It's going to look at the prompt, look at the zip file, and it's going to do the same thing that we did before. It's going to ask questions about the application, about the specifications that you're trying to make in V2. And based on those clarifying questions, it's going to give you a better output block. So I'm not going to spend the time to go through the questions here, but exactly what you did before, you're going to load in the zip file, load in the prompt. It'll ask you the questions. Be mindful of what your app has and doesn't have. So really take a look at your V1 app, and if there are things you want or don't want or things that you want clear, put that into the prompts. This is your chance to really make it your own application and make it what you want. So you don't just have to use the defaults that I've put in here. You could really dive in and make it your own. So yeah, I'm just gonna hit enter. It's gonna ask me questions. We've seen that before, but right now we're gonna jump into exercise 2. We'll have 20 minutes again. Like I said, the reveal one password is blueprint, so it's right here on the screen, so you don't need to memorize it. So yeah, first thing, download the zip file from Replit, so you have your full project as a zip. You're gonna load that along with your update prompt into ChatGPT or whatever LLM you're using. You'll answer the clarifying questions, and that'll generate your V2 update spec. And so the goal of this is to get that update spec. If you have credits to use, please feel free to go ahead and build your V2. If you've hit the free credit limit, don't worry, you could do it tomorrow and see how that works out. After the 20 minutes, I'll show you what Replit built for the V2, why it's better, why it gets us more of what we need, and then we'll do some wrap up. So first thing you notice is it's dark mode. I like dark mode. You will notice it did put in a light mode option too, so it's good to have both. So first thing, it's on one screen, right? You're not scrolling. You don't need to go down to be able to see any of the detail. Everything is right here. It still has the major numbers at the top like it did before. It did change the what matters most now. So you could see it's not just looking at percent. You could do by dollar. You could look at over. You could look at under. You could look at by function or by line item. It's just giving you a little bit more functionality there. You'll also notice the data issues now. It's in the top right here. So it's not in the middle of everything. It's not going to get your execs asking you questions about it. But again, you could click on here. You could see what data issues you have, and then you could go and fix up any missing fields or wrong fields that you have in your data. And then lastly, the Agentiq piece of this is this generate executive brief. So I'll click on this here. And this is the part that the executives are going to care about the most. They'll like the rest of the report and some will want to look at it more than others, but this is the part that they need to know. And you could even copy this into an email and send it to them, but it's giving you the headline of how much you are over budget, which areas were over budget the most, what that means, the implication of it, and then these decisions and asks here. So review the spend in marketing. For sales, review the spend there. If you did have something that was under budget, it could be worth looking at as well, because maybe you are budgeting too much in that area and you could reallocate it elsewhere. So good to be able to understand all of that. And so that is basically the value that you're getting out of this app. So we built this whole thing. It's usable, it's nice, it looks clean, and it's giving you exactly the decisions that need to be made by your executives in that meeting. So let me jump back over to the slides here. All right, so I just did the live reveal. I would like to hear from all of you though. How did you feel about this exercise? What broke? What surprised you? What would you like to try to do next with this? Any thoughts that you have at all? So this fast cycle that I've introduced, this is reusable. Use it when your direction changes, when you get a new business question, a new stakeholder you need to support, start at the top and work back through. As we mentioned during the break before, if you don't have a tool approved and you want to be able to use it for work, download a CSV of your data and have your LLM obfuscate that data. So it'll keep the structure, it'll keep the field names, it'll change the data. So that way you could load it into the coding tool, have it build, you could show your executives and your stakeholders what you're able to build. And then after the fact, if they do approve it, it'll be a lot easier to swap your real data in there. And lastly, and we've touched on this multiple times, but the spec is the skill here, the ability to talk to the LLM, have it ask you questions, you get an output, you're updating based on that output. That is the skill, and that is what you're going to be able to take and use in a variety of different tools. The tool itself is replaceable and will change, especially as these tools change over time. The last thing I want to leave you with here, in the app kit, there is a second reveal here. So I'm just going to jump back. All right, so the reveal for round 2, it's playbook, one word. So I'm just going to type that in. There's 3 things in here for you for after the workshop. The first thing, this is a final golden specification. So what this would do is build you roughly the V2 application. Now, again, this is just good for a template or to review. This is not something that I want you to use and iterate off of, because it's so much better to go through the process and clarify it yourself and get to what you want. And the second thing in here is the slides. So you could have a PDF of the slides. And then the last thing, it's a PDF. It says your next steps with FAST. So what I did was I just created a very short PDF of next steps that you could use the fast cycle for after the workshop in ways that you can apply it at work. So yeah, that's what I have. I appreciate all your time today. It's been great. Thank you for building with me. And please feel free to find me on LinkedIn after. Thank you so much.